Welcome back. It is exactly 8:57 a.m. At 9 o'clock exactly, we will be going to the second hour of the show. And a reminder that the second hour of News and Views is brought to you by Africa Muslims Agency. So we do hope you're also going to stay tuned for the Fire Up series with Hafiz Imran Chunara, personal excellence, a mentor, and CEO of Africa Muslims Agency. But right now, we are joined by Professor Christopher Isike. He is Professor of African Politics and International Relations, and he's going to unpack the Alaska summit with us. We do know that Trump met with, he in fact invited Putin to Alaska for the supposed summit, but there are people from certain quarters suggesting that Trump needed a break from the infighting within MAGA, which of course is the acronym for Make America Great Again. So he decided to have this meeting with Putin and hoping that it would do the trick. What was promised to Putin at this supposed summit, and what was the result of the meeting? A very good morning to you, Professor Christopher Isike, Professor of African Politics, and of course, you are also, let's just see that I get all of your credentials correctly, Professor of African Politics and International Relations, the right person to be talking about the Trump issue and the summit in Alaska. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Julie, and thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here. So how did you see all of this? A summit called by Trump at this stage, with Putin knowing what's going down in the Ukraine. What promises were made to Putin to attend the summit and the talks on the Ukraine?
Look, well, I doubt that there were much promises made to him because, they didn't need to. Putin already knows that Trump likes him, if you like, admires him, in fact, and panders to him in many ways. The minute he was sure that he would not be arrested, of course, the United States is not a member of the ICC, even though it has pressured countries like South Africa in the past to arrest Putin if Putin were to visit South Africa during the 2023 BRICS summit, for example. He was sure that he was not going to be arrested in America. Having known that Trump was one who admires him, it was perfect for him to come, because the visit alone to America, without any agreements reached, in itself is a victory for Mr. Putin and Russia. You just need to take a look at the Russian media to see how this was choreographed, presented, and celebrated to understand the point I'm trying to make. So it was something that Putin very well also wanted, much as Trump wanted it, for the optics.
So let's look at, I think on a lot of people's minds was that the summit would address the situation regarding Russia's incursion into Ukraine. And it is high time, according to Western leaders and Trump himself, that this war should end. Putin is not going to give up any of the territory it's won up to now regarding its excursion or the war in the Ukraine. Do you think that that was on the table? Do we know that that might have been discussed, and what Putin's reaction might have been regarding pulling out of the Ukraine completely and possibly, giving back some of the territory that it had taken in the course of this war?
Well, I'm sure that it was on the table. We still don't know what both men discussed, really. We don't have all the details of what was offered, what was promised on the side of Putin, if at all he promised anything. We only know that, yes, there would be, he was willing to commit to a peace agreement if Ukraine was to agree to allow Russia to have lands, even lands in the Donbass that it was yet to conquer. Now, what Putin was giving in return, it was supposed to be an end to the war, and a promise that he would not attack Ukraine or any European country again. But we do know also that Putin is not one that keeps to his word, so that's something to think about. But the security guarantees part, which will come out from the discussions between Trump and Zelensky and other European leaders today, would determine what exactly that would mean for Ukraine. The problem here is that Trump is not really in this to protect Ukrainian or European interest. He's simply doing this to keep a campaign promise, and on top of it, hopefully to get a Nobel Peace Prize award. That's what Trump is doing, and so he's not committed to the peace agreement per se. Of course, he's interested in ensuring that America doesn't spend more of its monies in the war. All of those things are what drives him. So nothing for Ukraine, nothing for Europe. And whether Europe and Ukraine can trust him to be a good negotiator on their behalf with Mr. Putin is what really bothers a lot of watchers of this particular war.
What a narcissist is all I can say. What are the chances of him actually getting the prize, being nominated? He's obviously nominated. What are the chances that he actually gets the Nobel, is the recipient of that Nobel Peace Prize? Actually would be quite a comedy, I think. How on earth can people even have suggested that he should be standing to receive that prize?
Well, it is interesting because the Nobel Peace Prize is not supposed to be given to people who actively seek it and rig the system to get it, if you like, right? How peaceful is Mr. Trump, for example, when he's engaged in talks with Iran, and at the same time meeting with Israel and to try and derail that same peace process, right? How peaceful has he been in encouraging Netanyahu to do what he has done in Gaza? Has there been peace in Gaza? No. Is it going to be resolved in ways that majority of the world wants, including the Palestinians, if they are seen as humans? The answer is no. But it's interesting because we've had one of his biggest opponents in the person of Hillary Clinton say that if Trump was able to negotiate for a peace agreement that would work for Ukraine and especially Ukraine and its peoples, that she would be one of those who would nominate him for the award. But the question is, will he negotiate for a peace prize? Can he push for a peace agreement that will be beneficial to Ukraine? What would be the point of Ukraine giving up Donbass? They've already given up Crimea, and I don't think that Crimea, even though it is very deep into Ukraine, is part of what Trump would negotiate for Ukraine to have back. In fact, we've heard him say on his social media, saying that there is no way Ukraine should think of a return to getting Crimea because that was Obama's problem, and that era is gone. So clearly they are not going to get Crimea, even though it is deep in the heart of Ukraine. They're going to now give up Donbass. And then all for what? So those are things that peace, those who give the peace award, the Nobel Peace Prize, those are things they have to look at. Of course, Ukraine will never agree to this because the Donbass is very rich in economically, in minerals, is strategic in terms of location. So politically, economically, and socially, it is not something that will work for Ukraine. But even if they do give it up, we must also ask the question of peace at what cost, to both to Ukraine and to Europe. So It will be interesting if this does happen. If it happens, maybe Trump could be considered for it, because of the fact that anything that concerns Europe, those that in our current world are seen as the real humans, is what obtains. Anything else is inconsequential.
And sadly, I think what the Western world seems to close their eyes to the fact that, I'm quite surprised that Hillary Clinton would even suggest that she would vote for him to be awarded the Nobel Prize, if he's able to broker this peace deal between Putin and Zelensky. But what about Palestine? What about the fact that it is US and UK arms that is fueling the genocide in Palestine? So, there seems to be, not seems to be, there is clearly two standards, one for the global north and one for the global south. The global north will support white, supremacist leanings, and look upon the global south as probably second-class citizens or subhumans or animals, is how Netanyahu and his cronies, supported by Trump, refer to the Palestinians as subhumans or animals. And then it's people like this that expect to then receive the Nobel Peace Prize. What is this world coming to, Professor?
Well, the world has always been like that. From the very inception, the international system was established based on a bifurcation of people into two zones of beings, right? The human beings being Europeans, the Westerners, and the rest of us as non-beings, who were not expected to benefit from the beneficiations that come with the international system, the enacting of the international system. We're supposed to eat from the crumbs left off for us by those who were considered to be beings, and the beings being the Western Europeans. And so for me, that fundamental ontological question of race and belonging, who's human and who's not, has been at the fulcrum of in the international system. The divisions we see in the international system, the divisions between the rich and the poor, the so-called North and South, developed and underdeveloped, all these divisions, all these lines that have been put in place exactly have been put in place to fit that initial design. And so until we really, as humanity, come together to ask and answer this question of who's human and who's not, do we all belong to a human race? If we answer that in the affirmative, then we'll all now begin to see an injustice to someone in the global north as the same way we would see an injustice to someone in the global south, right? If you want to go with those terms. So that for me is a fundamental problem. When we talk about restructuring the United Nations Security Council, the United Nations economic system that many say has been rigged in favor of the rich north, it's the bottom line, the fundamental of that is the question of racial inequality, human inequality. Once we resolve that, most of the other problems will be resolved easily, because we will now be acting collectively to solve collective problems in one prism, from one standpoint. And once the world is united to deal with any problem, there is nothing it cannot deal with. The problem, however, is that we are not united about who's human and who's not. And that's how you see how the world expected us to unite and decry Russia's invasion of Ukraine, because the human beings, those considered humans, were now being killed in Europe. Europe is not supposed to be a place where people fight wars. Those wars are supposed to be in Africa, where and the Middle East, where the humans who constitute those places are seen as subhumans or barbarians, right? And then you will see this rhetoric clearly in the way that the Netanyahu administration, that in my view is committing a second Holocaust in the Palestine. It has, as said, the kind of way they have represented and presented the Palestinians as less humans, and even Trump himself. So the world has always been like this. Okay, it is left to the rest of us. The solution will not come from the oppressor. The solution will come from the oppressed themselves. The oppressed needs to really have a hard look at itself and begin to reimagine itself, be proactive about how it is seen and how it is conceived, and begin to change those narratives in the way it does and treats its own self. I'm talking about, for example, leadership, not just in Africa, but in the Middle East. The kind of monies that we see in the Middle East, ensuring that governance is reinvented, is development focused, and the same thing in Africa. If we reinvent the state, we reinvent governance, and pool our resources together, do business with each other, trade with each other, there is no way we will not be forced into the reckoning. We will not even need to ask the question of who's human or not, because we would have shown that we are capable of doing anything that the global north thinks it is capable of doing or has arrogated to itself. And in that case, we would force them to come to the table to begin to beg for whatever we can offer them, because the wealth of the world is actually now in the global south, not in the north anymore.
And that is why we're seeing such a lot of unrest in Africa and in the Middle East, simply because the imperialists, they still have, the global north still has this this idea that they are the chosen people and they're the imperialists and they want to rule the world, sadly so. And Trump, obviously being a modern day pharaoh, together with Netanyahu and all of their cronies, sad to say that we in the global south need to wake up. We need to start strategizing, protecting ourselves, our resources, and reclaiming what is rightfully ours. But I just want to also now go back to Trump, his leadership style, and the reason for why. But before I get to the summit, can I just hone in on something you said about the situation in Palestine? We now refer to it as a genocide. The Western world or the global north refuses to use the word genocide. You are one of the few people who've gone on to suggest it is now a Holocaust. Jewish people will refuse to accept that it's a Holocaust simply because they want to own that title, and they can't, if they can't admit to the fact that what is going down in Palestine is a Holocaust, and it is their own people that have created this Holocaust. What would you say is the difference between a genocide and a Holocaust?
Well, look, there's no difference really at the end of the day, right? The Holocaust was something that the Jews appropriated for themselves, given the dastardly treatment they got from the Germans, right? And they've curated it and used it as a soft power tool to essentially deceive the rest of the world into allowing them concessions, that have now created what we are seeing today. For some reason, people who claim that they've suffered a Holocaust should and have maintained and ensure that they kept that conversation alive to prevent it from happening again, because that is their purpose, really. It is curious that the same people would tolerate and support their government to do so. Of course, I understand that there are a lot of anti-Zionist movements in Israel. There are those who are Jews who are claiming different parts of the world, even in America, coming out to say this is not in our name and opposing what the government is doing. That is commendable, because at the end of the day, it is going to be their Achilles heel, because we've seen a lot of that soft power, that wool that they've had over the eyes of many people in the world is now off, and people are now calling it what it is in America. And there are strong supporters, even in the US, that are now advocating for an American foreign policy that's not necessarily tied to to the interest of Israel, but to America interest. So we can actually ask the question of whether America has been captured by Israel, and that will be the case if you look at the role that Israel, through its lobby groups and in America, play in American politics, and how, as a collective diaspora, they influence American foreign policy towards the Middle East and to be pro-Israel particularly. But look, the fact of the matter is that the first Holocaust in the world, the first genocide in the world, was committed by the Belgians against Africans, the people of the DRC, by King Leopold of Belgium. That was the first Holocaust. That killed over 10 million Africans, murdered them. So we're talking about 6 million that was killed and then referred to that as the first Holocaust. That was the second one. And the third one now is being committed, in my view, by Israel in Palestine. And I am very deliberate about the use of the Holocaust because I want to attract that debate for us to have this discussion of what constitutes a Holocaust and how is what is happening in Gaza now different, from what was committed against the Jews. And I condemn that, what was committed against the Holocaust. I condemn it because it was wicked, it was inhuman. But it is the same wickedness, the same inhumaneness that is now being perpetrated by the same people against another. And I think that every right-thinking Israeli or anyone of Jewish descent should really ask questions around what is happening and what implications this will have for their collective identity going forward.
We have to wrap up now. My next guest is standing by. I really do appreciate your deep insights. We started out by talking about the summit that Trump organized between, that he invited Putin to, and we've obviously touched on other issues regarding world politics, and I think it all does tie in together. But let's wrap up again with the summit between Trump and Vladimir Putin. Do you think anything of substance actually came out of this, or was it just a big showmanship?
Well, I think the initial question you asked was whether this was a distraction from the Epstein files case. Well, it could be. The taking over of DC is also one of, we can read like that. So this summit was something that was in the offing. Trump has been looking forward to it. So I think the opportunity came and he took it to try and get a deal because that's what he promised. But like I said, he's not really invested in it to happen for the Ukrainian people and to benefit America in any way. So that for me is why I would wonder whether anything came out of it. But to answer the question shortly, I think that we would know once he's had a meeting with the Europeans and Zelensky today, the whole detail of what was promised, what he promised, and what promises he got, concessions he is going to get from Russia if Ukraine agrees. We would know the details of that. But the fact that he is now pushing it back to Zelensky and Ukraine is what worries me, telling me that the whole summit then was a sham, if at the end of the day it was going to be down to Ukraine and not to the superpower America.
And that's where we leave it. Thank you indeed. Lovely talking with you. Till the next time, go well. It is exactly 9:21 a.m. We're moving along, and our next guest is on standby. We're going to be talking with Dr. Mohammed Haroon Khatibi. We are going to look at the issue in Afghanistan, inshallah. So stand with us.